appreciate it. I know there's several things you could be doing today, but thank you for coming. I'd also like to first thank God for blessing me and allowing me to get to this point in my life, and blessing me with a wonderful family. I want to acknowledge my wonderful mother, my heroine. Thank you for your unconditional love and support, and for just loving me and providing me with what I needed to get to this point. I'd also like to acknowledge my father for his love and support throughout my life. He's played a very instrumental role in my development as well. I want to thank the best big brother in the world, Brother Adam, the day, for always loving me and looking after me. I also want to thank my grandparents, both of my grandfathers, for the lives that they led and the example that they provided for me in the way that they conducted themselves. I want to thank both of my grandmothers, Mama Joe and Mama. They couldn't be here today, but I want to thank them for their love and for being my spiritual anchors and showing me the right way to live my life. I'd like to thank my aunt, Tante Lisa, for her unconditional love as well, for taking time out of her schedule to come down and support me this evening and be a representative from my father's side of the family. And lastly, I'd like to first acknowledge the committee, my outstanding committee, my advisor, Dr. Billy Hawkins. Thank you for your expertise and your guidance over the past several years that I've been here studying under you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Dr. Rose Sepultura-Thompson. Thank you very much for your expertise and support throughout this process. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Jory Hall for your expertise and your guidance and support throughout the course of my dissertation. I want to thank all of my colleagues here as well. Friends from when we were younger to recent friends to some of my students, and I really appreciate it. So without further ado, I'd like to present to you my dissertation titled A Mixed Methods Exploratory Study of Black Male Student-Athlete Experiences at a Historically Black University. So a brief introduction as to my research topic. Black male athletes, and I intentionally use the term athletes when I'm referencing black males who attend predominantly white institutions, larger predominantly white institutions, Division I institutions, that generate a significant amount of revenue via television contracts and sponsorships through the entertainment value associated with their athletic participation. So abundance of the literature on black male athletes in these institutions have highlighted some key themes in terms of their experiences that contribute to their academic underperformance. And these experiences, some common themes, are experiences with racial discrimination, social isolation, academic neglect, and athletic exploitation. However, there is a limited amount of research that's been conducted on black male student athletes at historically black colleges and universities. And that was the initial inspiration for this research. I wanted to see if some of these challenges were also present at historically black colleges and universities, given the vastly different history and sociocultural makeup. So a statement of the problem for my dissertation is a long-standing problem facing post-secondary institutions in the United States has been the persistently low graduation rates of black male student athletes and the concurrent academic achievement gap between black male student athletes and their student athlete counterparts. So historically, compared to white male student athletes, white female student athletes, and even black female student athletes, black male student athletes post the lowest graduation rates. And this has been consistent since the National Collegiate Athletic Association has began tracking graduation success rates. The purpose of the study was to identify key influences associated with the academic achievement and college experiences of black male student athletes at a historically black university in the southeastern United States. My three research questions. The first research question I was interested in understanding was what were the motivations for choosing to attend a historically black university as opposed to a larger Division I predominantly white institution. The second research question focused on how do black male student athletes make meaning of their holistic experiences in college. And so these holistic experiences include their overall experience, academic experiences, athletic experiences, as well as social experiences. And then the final research question was what are the key influences associated with the academic achievement of black male student athletes. The significance of my study, the first significance is that it contributes new knowledge, the generation of new knowledge around the current topic. The second contribution is that it highlights the unique roles that historically black colleges and universities serve in the 21st century in the United States. And then the third significance of this study is that it provides useful information to all institutions of education that sponsor intercollegiate athletic programs, ways to improve black male student athletes' academic achievement and persistence in college. Before I get into the actual study, I want to make sure I highlight some delimitations, so some areas of weaknesses as well as limitations in terms of the scope of the study. One limitation is that I focus on one problem, and that is black male student athletes' underachievement academically. Therefore, in terms of maybe behavioral issues, health disparities, that's not the focus of this current study. The sample in this current study focused on black male football and men's basketball student athletes at one Division II historically black university. Therefore, it delimited the findings. Therefore, they cannot be generalizable to the entire group across the country. And then data analysis methods were involved a thematic analysis of my institutional document review, my 3 semi-structured focus group interviews, 4 in-depth individual interviews, and then for my student athlete college experiences questionnaire, I limited it to descriptive statistics and correlation analysis, which limited my ability to identify causal relationships. These are just a few of the delimitations, so this is not an exhaustive list. Limitations associated with the study in terms of the scope. I used estimated college GPA, so the student athletes, when they filled out the questionnaire, they reported their GPA. I did try to ascertain their actual GPAs, but due to the Buckley Amendment associated with the family privacy rights, I was unable to access that information. So that was an attempt to identify their actual GPAs, but that's a limitation of the study. The concurrent triangulation exploratory research design limited my ability to observe the phenomena over a period of time. So I was only looking at one point. The use of purposeful sampling as opposed to random sampling techniques limited my ability to generalize findings. So there was a specific group that I was targeting as opposed to a random group. And then the use of a constructed questionnaire as opposed to a pre-reliable and pre-validated instrument limited my confidence in inferences. I'll explain a little bit further about the factor analysis process that was not incorporated in this study. A brief overview of the literature review. As I mentioned in the introduction slide, an abundance of the literature is focused on black male athletes' experiences at predominantly white institutions. In 1989, the National Collegiate Athletic Association commissioned the first national study looking at black male athletes' experiences at different institutions. This study included 4,083 student athletes across the country, all Division I institutions. It included 39 predominantly white institutions and 3 historically black institutions. Key findings from this study revealed that black athletes at historically black colleges and universities not only performed better academically, but reported higher levels of social engagement. So some of those key things that I highlighted on the introduction slide were indicative in the responses of the black athletes who attended predominantly white institutions. More recently, Dr. Person and Dr. Lenore conducted a study of 31 African Americans at Division I institutions. There were 11 institutions included in this study, 9 predominantly white institutions, 2 historically black institutions. And one of their key findings were that the interactions between faculty and students was increased at the historically black college and university. So it was increased faculty-student interaction. And then Dr. Jennifer Brown did her dissertation looking at the connection, the relationship between academic self-efficacy, black racial identity, and athletic identity among black student athletes at one predominantly white institution and one historically black institution. A key finding from her study was the student athletes, the black male student athletes at the historically black university performed better academically. And the 4 key issues that were also included in my dissertation that she highlighted in terms of factors related to black male student athletes' academic achievement were effective integration into the academic culture, the presence of strong peer relationships, effective study habits, and perceived positive perceptions of institutional support. For the theoretical framework for my dissertation, I used institutional theory by Dr. Powell and Dr. DiMaggio. The 3 core components of the institutional theory focus on institutional arrangements. So within the context of a historically black college and university, institutional arrangements will look at who are the individuals who fulfill the presidential role, the administrative role, the faculty roles, as well as the athletic staff roles. In this case, all of the individuals who fulfilled these roles at this institution, or a majority, were of African American background. Social processes focus on looking at interactions, understanding relationships, and socialization processes that take place within the context of a university. And in the cultural context, as I alluded to earlier, historically black colleges and universities were founded on principles to provide educational opportunities for black students during a time when black students did not have access to predominantly white institutions. Additional components of institutional theory that will be incorporated in this study, or that were incorporated in this study, was key institutional actors in the form of faculty, staff, coaches, and peers. Institutional actions, which were highlighted as formal policies in the form of mission statements, student-athlete handbooks, and compliance guidelines. And then in informal practices, the nature of their interactions with their institutional actors. And then the institutional meanings were the perceptions of the black male student-athletes. So how did they perceive these policies and interactions, and how did that influence their experiences? My methodology included a mixed methods exploratory study. Essentially, the paradigmatic stance associated with mixed methods that I incorporated in this study was a complementary strength stance. Simply, all that means is that I use quantitative data in the form of a questionnaire with the qualitative data from my interviews as well as the document review in order to offset the weaknesses of each approach, okay? The qualitative approaches, as I mentioned, I used the institutional document review. I reviewed 5 institutional documents: the institution's mission statement, the athletic department mission statement, the student-athlete academic support services mission statement, the student-athlete handbook, and the student-athlete compliance guidelines book. For the 3 semi-structured focus group interviews, I had 17 participants. The first focus group interview consisted of 4 football student-athletes and 4 basketball student-athletes. The second focus group interview consisted of 4 basketball student-athletes, and the final focus group interview consisted of 4 football student-athletes. And then the 4 semi-structured individual interviews, there were 2 basketball student-athletes and 2 football student-athletes who also participated in the previous focus group. The quantitative approach in the study included a 53-item student-athlete questionnaire with 26 sub-items, so it was a total of 79 items. The core components focused on looking at academic experiences, athletic experiences, social experiences, as well as demographic features of the student-athletes. The research design is a concurrent triangulation exploratory design. Concurrent meant that the data was collected during the same phase. So when I performed the institutional document review, I also administered the questionnaires during the same phase. So typically in a mixed methods approach, you use one method, qualitative or quantitative, to inform the development of a subsequent method. So maybe you would do focus group interviews to inform how you would create a questionnaire for subsequent administration. For this particular study, there was a pilot study that was conducted, but for the actual dissertation, data was collected concurrently to incorporate the term triangulation. So in terms of triangulation, I involved data and methodological triangulation. Data was triangulated because I included black male student athletes from 2 different sports, football and basketball. So there were 2 different sports. In addition, I had a cross-sectional range of student athletes, from first-year student athletes all the way to 5th-year student athletes. And then it was exploratory in nature because the purpose was not to define causal relationships or to predict certain outcomes. It was to gain a better understanding of black male student athlete experiences in order to provide recommendations to improve their circumstances. My data collection included purposeful sampling, black male football student athletes, and men's basketball at a historically black university. As I mentioned a second ago, I included 5 institutional documents where I performed a thematic analysis. For the SACEQ, I had 57 participants, so it was a 50.4% response rate. All of the participants, it's important to know, all of the participants who were able to attend the administration of the questionnaire did complete the questionnaire. I didn't have anybody refuse. There were a few student athletes who did not fit the demographic group that I was desired to target, so those questionnaires were not included in the analysis of the study. There were 49 football student athletes and 8 basketball student athletes. The increase in football, just for those who may not be as familiar with sports, the roster sizes for football teams typically run between 80 and 100 plus members on the team. For basketball, at most, you'll have 15 players on the team. So that's the disparity in terms of the participant sample size. Focus group interviews, 17 participants, and then the in-depth individual interviews, 4 participants. My data analysis, I did a thematic analysis which incorporated a multi-step process to identify emergent themes from the participants' responses. The open coding process involved a line-by-line coding of each interview. So there was a sentence about their motivation for attending the institution. If it was, say, I attended this historically black college university because my dad went there, then it was cited as family. Okay, so that's an example of an open code. For axial coding, there was a subsequent process. Once there was an exhaustive list of open codes, I clustered those comments together based on common themes. So let's say the example I just provided, if one student athlete said, I went here because of my dad. Another student athlete said, I went here because my sister went here. Those all would be included in the axial code under family. Okay? Comparative coding involved the analysis of multiple documents. So for the institutional document review, once the axial codes were created, I compared them across all 5 documents. So for example, and I'll speak in here in a moment about an emergent theme, but for example, one of the core themes across institutional documents was this notion of faculty-student relationships. Okay, and that was something that was present across all 5. In terms of the interviews, one of the common themes that emerged was this notion of support from professors. Okay, so that was something that was coded in the comparative coding. Selective coding process simply focused on highlighting which codes were reflective of the data was quantized, which meant that I counted the amount of codes that were identified, and to make sure that whatever the emergent themes were supported and grounded by the participants' responses. And then in vivo coding, which you'll see here momentarily, simply meant that I used the exact words of the participants to conceptualize the themes. As opposed to applying my own terms or terms from the literature, it's the participants' words which are speaking out in the report. Quantitative data analysis involved descriptive statistics and Pearson product moment correlations. So in this order, I'll present to you the results from all 4 of my data collection methods. For the institutional document review, the emergent themes, there were 3 emergent themes that came out. The first one was a comprehensive educational experience. At this institution, there are a whole host of majors that are offered, ranging from business to criminal justice, education, nursing, public administration. This institution, in order to preserve anonymity, I won't give any excessive details, but I will highlight that the U.S. News and Report highlighted this institution as one of the top 30 historically black colleges and universities in the country. There are a total of 105 historically black colleges and universities in the United States, and they're ranked in the top 30. Within the state this institution was located, this institution is among the top 10 in graduation rates for black students overall. In addition, based on NCAA data, this institution graduated football and men's basketball student athletes at higher rates than all other Division II institutions in terms of, for black male student athletes, the rates for those institutions. In addition, a comprehensive educational experience, as I mentioned earlier, the faculty-student ratio of this institution was 21:1. So that low student to faculty ratio was something that was very important, and it was highlighted across all documents. For total student development, this institution sponsored 50 campus organizations. One of those organizations being, and once again I'm applying a pseudonym to preserve anonymity, was this program called the Institute for African American Males. This institute was specifically designed to equip black males, African American males, with leadership skills, mentorship, community service, and holistic development. And so this is a program that's sponsored by the institution. In addition, the institution focused on study abroad opportunities for not only student athletes, but for all students, as well as student athletes were also required to do community service hours every semester. And it was based on a team basis, but that focused on this notion of total student development. Their presence at the school was not only tied to their athletic participation, but also their presence as citizens of the world. The educationally based intercollegiate athletic program, throughout all of the institutional documents, this institution explicitly stated a partnership between the academic aspects of the university and the athletic aspects of the university. There were interim reports that were submitted between the athletic department, academic advising departments, as well as the professors and the faculty, which helped communicate to the student athletes their academic progress. Similar to most institutions, they had an eligibility standard of a 2.0. They're also required, a very interesting finding, they're also required to do 10 hours per week of mandatory study hall in season as well as off season. So in order to be eligible to participate in intercollegiate athletics at this institution, they have to do 10 hours of study hall throughout the course of the year. There is also an annual sports banquet that they host, which they recognize student athletes who earn a 3.0 or above. And this institution, the athletic department, are members of the National Student Athlete Honor Society, where they recognize juniors and seniors who earn a 3.4 or above. For SAQ results, for the purposes of the presentation, I've grouped these main categories, and this is the order in which that I'll present the findings to you. For the first 7, there will be descriptive statistics, and then here at the end, I'll report my reliabilities and correlations for the instrument. So to give you an overview of the participants, the demographic background, nearly 30% grew up in a 2-parent household. So one stereotype associated with black males is that many black males grow up in single-parent households. Reports from this study did not necessarily reflect that. However, nearly 50% did not indicate or answer this question. So it may indicate that they may not feel comfortable talking about their personal background. In terms of annual household income, nearly 30% were reported coming from environments where their family household income was between $10,000 and $29,999. So a majority of the participants were from low-income backgrounds. For high school demographics, over 1/3 attended predominantly black high schools. That's an important finding because it indicates that their decision to choose to attend a historically black university could be tied to their level of comfort within a predominantly black environment. Their primary college choice, 57.9% said they would prefer to have attended a Division I predominantly white institution. This is not surprising given that these were student athletes who had professional sport aspirations, and Division I predominantly white institutions have higher levels of visibility, not only enhanced facilities, but also in terms of their athletic competitions being televised across the country. And then among transfer student athletes, the majority of the students were non-transfer student athletes, meaning that they enrolled in the institution either immediately after high school or they did not attend any other institution prior to their enrollment at the HBU. In terms of student identity, I had a question asking about how they identified themselves. 66.7% said that they were students first and athletes second. So that's an important finding I'll highlight later. In contrast with athletic identity, only 34% said that they felt that they were athlete first. In terms of importance of being a student, an overwhelming majority said being a student was an important part of their lives, 68.4%. And then also in terms of importance of being an athlete, 73.7% said being an athlete was an important part of their life. For high school GPAs, 33.3% reported earning between a 2.5 and a 2.99 GPA in high school. 26.3% highlighted earning between a 3.0 and a 3.49. The lowest percentage within this group was between a 3.5 and a 4.0, the highest level of academic achievement, which was 10.5%. And then in terms of college GPA, a majority, 43.9% reported earning between a 2.5 and a 2.99. So in terms of their academic, the studies that highlight high school performance and college performance being similar, this study reflected that as well. Academic classification, 28.1% were first-year student athletes, 25% were second-year student athletes. So a significant majority were underclassmen, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later as to why that may be. In terms of commitment to academic major, 80.7% said that they were committed to their academic major. 87.8% said they were committed to earning a degree. And then 47.4%, nearly half, said that they had a commitment to pursuing graduate school. For sport participation, 84.2% participated in 2 or more sports in high school. So athletic participation was not only important in their lives, but a significant part of their identities growing up, participating in multiple sports, not only interscholastically, but also outside of school. College sport participation, as I mentioned earlier, 86% were football student athletes, 49, and then 14% were basketball student athletes. And then in terms of professional sport aspirations, 57.9% reported becoming a professional athlete was their primary goal. For motivations for attending to choose an HBCU, I'm just going to highlight briefly that these were the 4 areas among all the items for motivations that were important to them in terms of their attendance at the historically Black university: social environment, the academic programs, the athletic program, and then the location of the institution. For academic experiences, once again, I don't want to belabor the point. I want to make sure that I get to the meat of the data, which is the qualitative data. But nearly all of the participants reported having positive relationships with faculty, administrators, staff, as well as with other students who were not their teammates. So I asked the question about what are your relationships like with your teammates, your students, your classmates who are not your teammates. And then 66.7% reported being satisfied with their overall academic experiences. For athletic experiences, there were similar findings. The majority of the participants highlighted being satisfied with their coaches, the athletic staff, the time spent on their athletics, and then their overall athletic experiences. Regarding their social experiences, once again, students were very responsive in terms of their positive relationships with students who were their non-teammates, with their teammates, as well as with the campus environment overall. And then their overall social experiences, over half reported having a positive or being satisfied with their overall social experiences in college. So for the reliabilities, given the exploratory nature of this study, the reliabilities for the 3 constructs, for the academic experiences scale, athletic experiences, and social experiences scale, the identified reliabilities of 0.86, 0.87, or 0.86, and 0.93 were acceptable. I do want to mention that with instruments such as the questionnaire, in order to accurately measure internal consistency, you would need a larger sample size, and you would also need to conduct an exploratory factor analysis, which was not conducted in this study. In addition to validate an instrument, you would need to perform a confirmatory factor analysis to identify convergence and construct validity. So to put that in another way, this instrument is in development. So in terms of my inferences, in terms of applying it to a larger population, I am limited in that regard. For the constructs and the correlations, what I wanted to do for research question 3 in terms of what were the key influences associated with the academic achievement of Black male student athletes, I ran a set of correlation analyses between academic, athletic, and social experiences with their reported GPA. There were no statistically significant findings from those analyses. That could be attributed to the low sample size of this study. However, there were 2 statistically significant findings between academic experiences and athletic experiences. There was a moderate statistically significant correlation between the 2. And then between academic experiences and social experiences, there was a moderately positive association. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the qualitative findings. But those were the only 2 moderately statistically significant findings. From the focus group, and this is the core of the study, the focus groups and the qualitative data provided the rich data in terms of the lived experiences of the participants. And you'll hear this, hopefully the comments of the participants in my presentation of it will resonate with you as to how their experiences were in college. In regards to the first research question about their motivations for attending a historically Black university, the emergent theme, a sense of connection, was something that was salient across all responses. In regards to their overall experiences at a historically Black university, the theme of you're not alone when you come to an HBCU was salient. In regards to their academic experiences, the theme you're their children came out. In regards to their athletic experience, it's about time management came out. It's all about time management. In regards to their social experiences in college, the theme it's easy to get along with people was identified. And then in regards to their key influences associated with their academic achievement, just sticking with it. was something that was said. So in regards to their motivations for choosing to attend a historically black university, Mason, a fourth-year basketball player, I'm only going to read the quote of the in vivo code for the emergent theme was highlighted, and I'll provide additional details following the quote. Mason, a fourth-year basketball player, said, "I think it's more just a sense of connection because you're around, people that you're familiar to, like their skin color, how they talk, how they act, your sense of connection with everybody." So unlike at a predominantly white institution where black student enrollment is typically lower, and so as a result of that, black students overall, as well as black male student athletes, tend to be marginalized in terms of their representation, whether it be in campus organizations, student leadership, or even in the classroom. At a historically black university, you're surrounded by a critical mass of black students as well as black faculty, and that contributed to the participants' sense of connection at this institution. So therefore, there was a cultural congruence between the participants' pre-college experiences and their perception of the institution. This also echoes the findings from the questionnaire that's highlighted before college. The student athletes said the social environment and the location were important to their reasons for attending the institution. Now, I do want to read this one because this is a real quick quote, real quick. The reason I came to the HBCU was because of the coach. I felt like they wanted me to be here. I felt like it was going to be a family if I came out here. Like they're going to take care of me, they're going to look out for me. Overall, I just like being here. And that was Stevie, a first-year football player. In regards to their overall experiences in college, talked about how they didn't feel alone when they were at HBCU. Marcus, a first-year football player, stated, "I felt like when it comes to that, it's like you're not alone when you come to an HBCU. You're always going to have that support or that backbone to help you with everything. It's not like you're going to be left out in the cold or anything." So what the students were talking about here was that not only and this reflects the comprehensive educational experience theme from the institutional document review, when I was talking about the low student-to-faculty ratio, how the students felt supported by the faculty and the administration at the institution for their holistic development, not only based on their athletic performance. One point I also want to mention here, in terms of their overall experience, the most salient thing that they talked about among all the interviews in terms of the best experience at HBCU was the homecoming event. For those of you who aren't familiar with HBCU homecomings, they are a cornerstone event of these institutions that exemplify black cultural expression, empowerment, and unity. At these events, you have a whole host, it's usually a week-long of events ranging from step shows to parades, to music concerts, battle of the bands, tailgating. There's a whole host of, in addition, to keep in mind that the majority of historically black colleges and universities are located within black communities. So when these homecoming events are hosted, it's not only an institutional celebration, but it's a collective celebration of the community. Local businesses generate revenue from these events, and these participants internalize that as a positive impact in their sense of their sense of belonging at the institution. In relation to You're Their Children, this theme was in response to their academic experiences. Myron, a second-year basketball player, said, in a sense, a lot of my professors would tell you, like, you're their children. So now you get that sense of feeling that they'll help me when I mess up. Even if I really need something, I'm going to come see you, but they'll be there. So this notion, in the literature, there was a term by Professor Hurt and her colleagues called other mothering. And historically black colleges and universities, based on the creation of these institutions, is rooted in a familial context. It's a familial environment that is generated. Therefore, the success of the students at these institutions extends beyond just athletic performance. And these professors, the faculty and administration, engaged in what's called other mothering, whereby they were invested in the students' overall development as opposed to just one aspect of their development. In relation to their athletic experiences, the notion about it's all about time management, Kevin, a second-year basketball player, said, our freshman year, it was hard coming here for practice at 7 p.m., getting out of the gym at 11 p.m., then going to your room, maybe get done, take a shower about 12 a.m., then you still got work that needs to be done, and you might have class at 8 o'clock. I mean, it's hard, but it's all about time management. Regardless of the level of competition at the intercollegiate level, all student athletes have to balance their responsibilities as students and as athletes. Although the NCAA has a mandate that athletic participation is limited to 20 hours per week, 4 hours per day. Oftentimes, student athletes will say that it doesn't account for other energy and physiological, psychological energy that they apply towards their athletics. So even if they don't have to it's not a mandatory practice or game, they're still investing energy in their athletic participation while maintaining their student responsibilities. However, it's also important to note that these student athletes, although they acknowledge these time constraints, they also felt like they embraced them. They said, you know what, I've been an athlete my whole life. This is just a part of being an athlete, and it's all about time management. So they viewed this as a caveat to helping them develop effective time management skills. So as opposed to looking at their athletic participation as a negative experience, they felt like it enhanced their effective time management skills. For social experiences, it's easy to get along with people. Bobby, a fourth-year basketball player, said social life is going well. I enjoy it here at Northern Central. I mean, it's easy to get along with people, easy to talk to because they probably come from the same place you come from. This once again reinforces that idea that historically black universities provide educational opportunities for black students who may not otherwise have had the opportunity to go to school. So you've got a critical mass of black students across a range of backgrounds who share similar cultural experiences within the United States, and they felt that that contributed to their positive interactions. In addition, it plays into the notion of it takes a village to raise a child. The participants highlighted multiple individuals at this institution that contributed to their positive social experiences. They said not only do the professors are they easy to communicate with, the guys also highlighted the females being a positive at this institution as somebody that they could connect with. And then also, and they said that their relationship with the females was enhanced because of their athletic participation. Right, so once again, looking at this athletic participation as a positive contribution to their overall experiences, and then their relationship with community members outside the university. In regards to their overall experience, or excuse me, key influences associated with their academic experiences, the main theme came out just sticking with it. Philip, a first-year football player, said, I think basically just sticking with it. Once you hit that first bump, you just got to get over that. Just keep trying. If you go to class, everything should work out. You should graduate, because the teachers are going to see that you're trying and they'll work with you. I don't really know teachers here that if you go to class every day and try, they'll just let you fail. They wouldn't do that. So what the participants we're talking about here is that the primary factor in their minds that correlated with their academic achievement was a level of personal motivation and self-accountability. One of the negative stereotypes associated with black males is this notion of not having strong work ethics. These participants totally internalized the notion that I have to be motivated as well. In addition to this theme of just sticking with it, the participants highlighted 3 institutional services and programs that enhanced their level of commitment academically. One was a program called the Study Tables Program. It was a centrally located program offered by the Academic Student Affairs Department and the Academic Retention Center. And it was centrally located on campus, and it was a program where students could meet with professors and peer tutors on a one-on-one setting and receive assistance. So it was a quiet location, and it was intentionally located on the academic part of campus as opposed to within the athletic part of campus. The second aspect was the presence of peer tutors. The participants highlighted retrieving information or having information delivered to them by somebody who was around their age was helpful. And then the mandatory study halls. Within those mandatory study halls, the participants said that the strict monitoring of their attendance was something that they perceived as the institution cares about my presence here. So the monitoring didn't look like, they didn't feel as though their hands were being held. And actually quite the contrary, they said, hey, they care about my academic development, so if I'm not at study hall, I'm not going to be able to play. In terms of the in-depth individual interview emergent themes, this section I'll go through a little bit more quickly because the individual interviews weren't quite as intense as the focus groups. In relation to their motivations for choosing to attend the HBU, the notion of feel like home was salient. In regards to their personal backgrounds, for the in-depth individual interviews, the purpose of having these was to provide a deeper understanding of the personal backgrounds of the individuals. So they talked about a good environment growing up. In regards to their academic experiences, it's challenging was an emergent theme. In regards to their athletic experiences, they talked about it's our brotherhood. In regards to their social experiences, you're known around campus more. And then finally, in terms of their key influences associated with their academic achievement, it's an all-around effort at an HBCU. So the notion of feel like home, Bobby, a fourth-year basketball player, said, but here at Northern Central, it's more like feel like home. Like everybody, they love sports, and just the vibe. They'll talk to you. You can go have a conversation not just about sports, but just about everything, especially the faculty and staff. Maple Ridge, this student athlete transferred from a predominantly white junior college. He said we didn't have that teacher-student connection. So in terms of their interactions with professors, there were three things that professors did that they felt enhanced their engagement in the classroom. One, they were understanding of their schedules as student athletes. So the participants particularly highlighted how being an athlete was viewed in a positive light at the HBCU as opposed to being viewed negatively. Another thing that the teachers did, that the professors did, that the students perceived as being positive, is that they were able to meet with them outside of class. So, and as I mentioned in the literature review with Dr. Person and Dr. Lenore, the frequent student-faculty interactions outside of class, this finding reinforced that. And then the last thing that the participants highlighted was this notion that I can talk to my professors about things outside of academics. They actually care about me. So once again, that theme of other mothering was salient. A good environment growing up. So Mason, a fourth-year basketball player, said, so I've got two brothers and two parents, and it was a good environment growing up. They played sports when they were growing up, so they were big on school, doing the right thing with grades and stuff. So I didn't have any problems with like doing the wrong things outside of school. My dad was strict. He kept us in the right lane and stuff. All of these participants talked about their fathers and their lives. One of the participants, his father is now deceased. He actually just passed away while he was in high school. And he grew up with his mother, his grandmother, and his four sisters. But he talked about the presence of his father being something that motivated him in terms of why he was motivated to not only do well athletically, but to graduate from college. Another point that I want to highlight briefly is that these individuals had a higher level of social capital with HBCUs. So for the four individual interviewees, Bobby chose to attend the HBU because his high school coach, or his college basketball coach, was from his same hometown, and he recruited him. So that's that social connection, a sense of connection. For Mason, his father went to the institution. For Kyle, another individual interviewee, his friends and convinced him to go, even though he initially wanted to go to a predominantly white school. And then for Marcus, his football coaches were actually from his hometown as well. So once again, this notion of social capital and being connected to the institution was present. In regards to their academic experiences, the participants talked about how it was challenging. I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I'm just going to say the idea of time commitment associated with being an athlete and as well as a student, that it was very difficult to balance the two. And so they just talked about the challenges in balancing those two. But once again, the factors that helped them, in addition to personal motivation, were the mandatory study hall, the study tables, and the peer tutors. In regards to their athletic participation, Bobby, a fourth-year participant, said, my relationship with my teammates is pretty good. It's kind of like this is our fraternity. Like you have Greeks, but this is our fraternity. This is our bond, our brother, it's our brotherhood. The individual interviewees particularly highlighted how their teammates served as a support system for them to persist in college. So it was almost as if we're in this together. You can't become ineligible because we need you on the team. You can't drop out of school because you're going to ruin this bond that we have. So that connection was something that assisted them. You're known around campus more and focused on this notion of the popularity and visibility that they internalize as being representatives of the school. Kyle, a first-year student, talked about at a homecoming event, he said you're known around campus more, and it's not only on campus, it's also in the community. Say homecoming, like I say, I have a lot of, let's say you have a lot of people who come from outside of the college to see the homecoming game. So it's like you see little kids walking around, they look at you and, oh, that's what I want to be when I get older. So it's like, I feel like I'm somebody's hero. So once again, this connection to those in the community and being known, the visibility that they receive as student athletes. It's an all-around effort at an HBCU, so in terms of their key influences associated with their academic achievement, they talked about it was a concerted effort across the board. So it wasn't just their professors, it wasn't just their coach, it was everybody. Mason said, my advisors, they try to email me a lot. They try to make sure I'm doing the right things in classes, whatever class I need to take to graduate. And the study groups we go to, study tables, they do a good job too. So it's an all-around effort at an HBCU to try to get you to get your work done. So the key findings from the study reinforce the idea that HBCUs continue to serve as safe havens for Black male student athletes to experience positive relationships and holistic development. Findings are consistent with previous studies which found that athletic participation positively contributed to increased motivation to graduate. And then the findings also highlight the importance of non-cognitive factors such as the presence of strong faculty-student relationships, perceptions of institutional support, the promotion of effective study habits, academic self-motivation, and concerted institutional initiatives. In conclusion, incorporating the institutional theory, the findings indicate the importance of a comprehensive institutional mission, not only within the institution overall, but also specifically within the athletic department, and establishing a congruency between those policies, so the written documentation of those and the actual relationships and the enactment of those values was something that's important to improving quality educational experiences. The presence of a critical mass of Black faculty, administrators, and staff signal a welcoming environment for Black male student athletes. And then the emergent findings revealed that a concerted institutional effort at this institution led to the creation of a familial, culturally empowering, positive identity-affirming environment for Black male student athletes. That is the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you. With interpretive interaction-ism, it's a theory which focuses on this notion in order to gain a deeper knowledge of any reality is to observe it through subjective human experience. Okay, so what that means is in order to understand somebody's perception of something, you have to understand the way that their backgrounds, their experiences, how it's socially constructed. So as opposed to saying that there's one reality, there's one truth for everybody, you're trying to ascertain what social processes, what cultural context influence that person's perception. So within the context of this study, that interpretive interactionism, trying to understand subjective human experiences, social processes, and cultural context, I incorporated this institutional theory. So within the context of an institution, such as a historically black university, how did that influence black male student athletes' subjective experiences? What type of relationships and interactions took place that were involved in their social processes? How did they internalize their role as student athletes at the institution? And then also within the cultural context, based on their backgrounds prior to enrollment into the institution, was there a level of congruence between the institution and their perceived meanings at the institution and their lived experiences?
So that's the piece what I would suggest then to strengthen your argument around that would be, because you talk about your paradigmatic framework later, and you rely heavily on your qualitative data because it gives you the participants' perceptions about the institution, right? So I think your articulation of how they're coming together, how you're using them for the framing of your study would be important to say up front.
Okay.
And to be very clear about that explicit connection that you're making and why you're making it. Because it wasn't until after you outline your research design, your data collection, the theory you're using that you then went into your overarching paradigmatic framework. Okay, so I think it would make a lot more sense to bring it up further. The other thing I want to ask you about is your instrumentation. So you gave a lot of caveats as to how it is it's an instrument under development, the questionnaire, right? It's a questionnaire that you created. So then in the pilot study, you had some items that didn't quite meet up to the standards.
Right.
But then when you conducted the current study, the outcome increased, right? So can you talk a little bit about the revisions you made to that questionnaire to get that difference in the reliability of the questionnaire? Absolutely.
For each of the constructs, the creation of the student-athlete questionnaire, the initial, was a 38-item questionnaire. There were academic experiences, athletic experiences, and social experiences. The questions derived for that study were primarily from the literature. So when I'm talking about academic experiences, I'm asking, did they participate in honors programs, which was something in the pilot study was identified as not something that was present at all institutions. Possibly student athletes weren't able to identify what the term honors program meant. I also had another section about black racial identity. As I mentioned with Dr. Brown's study, she looked at academic self-efficacy, black racial identity, and athletic identity. The notion of black racial identity wasn't a salient theme. The participants didn't self-identify, say, hey, I feel like I am more black because I attend this institution. It was already present. They said, I'm black anyway. More particularly, for each construct, academic, athletic, and social, when I revised the instrument, as opposed to just having a smaller cluster of questions that were randomized, I had subset of questions pertaining to their relationships, so academic relationships, academic engagement, so in terms of their attendance in class, participation in study groups, and then their satisfaction. So from the focus group of the pilot study, I was able to delineate key sub-items that should be included within each of those constructs. In addition, as opposed to asking about their attendance in those events within that construct or those questions, I had a separate section which asked about the frequency and type of their activities. So in season and out of season, and that's something that I meant to highlight, is the student athletes talked about their academic experiences being vastly different while they were in season and when they were out of season. In season, there were significant time constraints associated with practice time, film session, traveling for games. Being that this was a Division II institution, and even the pilot study was a Division II institution, when they have to travel for games, they don't have the luxury of having to travel by plane. It's not within the athletic budget. Therefore, they have to travel on ground, which takes away time that they could be spending in the classroom or study halls, even though academic tutors did attend those games with them. So for the questionnaire, instead of having all of those questions packed in each section, I separated those questions, in season and out of season, the frequency and type of activities.
So answer this then. So somewhere in there, did you talk about that? Did you articulate those changes?
Absolutely, in the dissertation, yes ma'am.
Did you
In the appendices, yes,
okay.
ma'am.
All right, because I just wanted to make sure that you included that in it, because that seems to be really important about the inferences you can make. And it's not necessarily addressed in the method section itself, and so what I think you should do, in addition to having it in the appendix, by the way, Joseph's dissertation was over 500 pages, so I might have forgot something. I just wanted to, I don't know if you all can see it. Do you want to hold that up to your friends and family?
The average is what? Maybe the average is what, like, maybe
Not
half
that.
Yeah.
So,
You want it to be thorough.
it is appreciated. I don't want to leave that out. That is certainly appreciated. And you were very thorough. I just am seeking some clarification on some things. My last, I guess, comment or question would be about your analysis. And I'm glad you went into the social capital piece, because that was a question I had in regards to your finding and how you related that, because you kind of grouped together the family, the father example, and then the social things, the social interactions with the peers into one. But I think you explain that better in your presentation than you do in the actual dissertation around how that comes together as, because you just kind of jumped and said, therefore, this is social capital kind of thing. So I think if you really articulate how that represents social capital, that indeed these people were known prior to coming to the school, or there were some connections there, to help the reader understand how you make that interpretation of social capital, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
The last thing I guess I'd say is, well, I have two big questions and then I'm done for the most part.
Okay.
One is, you said you're doing a thematic analysis, which I certainly appreciate, and you had many wonderful themes with supporting evidence. But what I wonder is, you have accounted 4 different data collection types, is that right? Okay. With
3
that-
qualitative, 1 quantitative.
Right. So if you were, and you do this in the dissertation, but I think you could do it better. If you were to sit back and think across your 4 data types, I think you should think of meta themes.
Okay.
What would be your meta themes? And I think this relates back to the question that was posed or comment originally. What do all your data types support? What would be the themes that all 4 of those data types support? And really punch that and articulate that, because I think it kind of gets lost in the details. You go into each theme so in depth, but then when you cut across the data types and really think about what's standing out, can you, is there one theme that you think that really stands out that came out across all those different data types?
Yeah, I can think of 2. One is the notion of holistic development.
Okay.
So that's something that was indicative in the documents, the mission statements, as well as the interviewees and the participants' responses. It's this notion that I feel academically, athletically, socially, psychologically, I am supported. And in connection with that holistic development is this notion of familial, this nurturing environment. So those things of other mothering, it takes a village, those were salient across the board, across all data collection.
So that would be
methods.
1. And so what I propose you do in your discussion section, because like I said, it kind of gets lost, and maybe it might be helpful to think meta themes and then the 4 data types that support that. You can draw on that evidence.
Okay.
And the last thing I would ask you is, so now that you've done this mixed method study, what was the value added? You talked about your delimitations and limitations, but you say less about the value added. So what was the value added of the methodology itself?
I think, quite honestly, what it adds is, for one, there's a limited amount of research on historically Black colleges and universities. So when typically you're talking about Black male student athletes, it's almost as if, even though Division I institutions, among all Divisions 1, 2, and 3, Division 3 is the largest division in terms of member institutions. Division I is the second largest. But when you talk about Black male student athletes, they all get grouped into this group that is highly visible in the revenue generating, 2 highest revenue generating sports of football and men's basketball. So by highlighting their experiences within a different educational environment, a different structure in terms of their athletic department, it provides insight as to the problems that are persisting not only at the Division II level, but Divisions 1 and 3. There are some insights at this institution that show you can enhance academic achievement and you can incorporate sport within your educational mission to where it is reflective of that mission as opposed to separate from that mission. So many institutions within their educational missions talk about preparing students for life after college, equipping them with marketable skills, social capital to help move forward. But then when you look at the documented literature and these negative experiences coupled with the low graduation rates, it causes you to question whether these experiences at certain institutions within certain environments are not only fulfilling those missions, but are they doing a disservice to those individuals? So this current study highlights, and a core value of mine, and a part of my life goal is to highlight positive aspects of situations and to highlight solutions. So everybody, a lot of the literature, we highlight the problems and what things are going wrong. And even in light of historically black colleges and universities, the fact that many people don't know, even though these institutions constitute less than 3% of all institutions in the United States, they graduate nearly 20% of black students across the country. So this study talks about, within the context of this institution, individuals who may not have had the opportunity to go to college otherwise, some who did have the opportunity, they chose to go to a historically black university, but the richness of their experiences there and what factors contributed to the cultivation of that type of environment.
And I get that and I appreciate that, but what I really want you to think about more specifically is the methodology.
Okay.
And how does it get you that information in a richer way? Because your argument for doing the study is that somehow magically mixed methods helps you to get at all those things. Whereas another person can argue, couldn't you get at all of that either strictly quantitatively or strictly qualitatively? And what I really want you to think about is, what was the value added of doing both the survey and the questionnaire that you had and the focus groups and the documents and the individual interviews, and write that down and get that captured better than what you have here.
Okay.
So.
I want to sort of go back to that first question about what we talked about with institutional theory. I guess explain a little more how that study.
So within the context of institutional theory, I talked about institutional arrangements, social processes, and cultural context. So institutional arrangements involves individuals who fulfill positions of power. So when you're talking about presidents, you're talking about athletic directors, you're talking about coaches, who fulfills these positions. At these institutions, unlike at a majority Division I predominantly white institutions where these positions are typically held by white males, at these institutions they're held by black individuals, male and female. And so these institutional arrangements shape the perceptions and the experiences of the student athletes. And so for example, with the questionnaire, getting at these overarching themes that are salient across a larger group of participants. So if I was to do an in-depth analysis of just a smaller group, by seeing what these general themes are and cross-referencing those general themes with the context of a smaller setting, I'm able to identify how those institutional arrangements affect their perceptions. With social processes, we're talking about relationships, socialization, and interactions. So when we're talking about the student athletes meeting with their faculty members outside of class, talking with coaches about personal experiences, all of those are a part of their social processes.